So I want to start by recapping a couple of things, elaborating a bit on a couple of things that Bob talked about in his presentation 2 weeks ago. And you heard Bob say that all three of our churches have been in the Gothic style, and that was not an accident. And in fact, the Episcopal Church, starting in about 1840, had about a 90-year love affair with the Gothic style. And that preference for the Gothic is firmly rooted in what we call today the Cambridge movement. And the Cambridge movement, as the name implies, started at the University of Cambridge in about 1837, and a group of undergraduates there, including John Mason Neal, started. And I want to quote this here. They said that their society was dedicated to the study of Gothic architecture and of ecclesiastical antiquities. And they referred to themselves as ecclesiologists, and quickly began vigorously promoting the idea that Gothic architecture was the only true Christian architecture, and that more specifically, the middle pointed or the decorated style was the style in which the architectural and ritual provision for Christian worship had reached its point of perfection. So I think that's a pretty bold statement about anyone's standards, but I think they were actually onto something. The Gothic style is really a lovely style, and as the ecclesiologists knew very well, it lends itself very well to the sort of ritualized liturgical worship that we practice at Trinity today. But what I really wanted to point out about that was they were promoting more than just the architecture. They had this idea of aesthetics. I should say that their idea of aesthetics is sometimes rather nebulously defined, but it's that same thing that we at Trinity refer to as deep beauty. And for them, the aesthetics included not just the architecture, but the furnishings, the arrangement of the furnishings in the building, the decorations, stained glass, the chalices, shape of the chalices, vestments, crosses, candles, and the ritual. And so all that processing that we love and do so well at Trinity is actually not in the prayer book. It's actually not technically part of the liturgy, but it's ritual that we wrap our liturgy in to enhance it. And so this is what the ecclesiologists were promoting besides just the architecture. And yes, I want to point out that that's sort of the legacy that we've inherited at Trinity, this, most visibly in the Gothic architecture, but also in our decorations and the way that we worship. Just as an aside, I put up this picture of John Mason Neal just because he's a bit of a hero of mine. Has anyone heard of John Mason Neal? So Ron has. So he was an English priest. He was one of the original founders of the Cambridge Camden Society. And besides that, he was a really a noted scholar and a gifted translator. And so he is credited some 45 times in our hymnal 1982, mostly for translations of ancient Greek and Latin hymns into English. And a couple that you would probably recognize are "Come Ye Faithful, Raise the Strain," "All Glory, Loud and Honor," and "Christ is Made the Sure Foundation." And then he also wrote the lyrics for Good Christian Friends Rejoice. So if you've spent much time at Trinity at all, you've probably encountered some of Neal's work. So I think he's underappreciated. So I like to talk about him a bit when I have the chance. So Bob also mentioned the two great American architects who were famous for their use of the Gothic style, Ralph Adams Cram and Richard Upjohn. And in the Episcopal Church, we set aside December 16th to recognize Richard Upjohn, Ralph Adams Cram, along with John Lafarge, who is a French stained glass artist and painter. And the collect for that, for December 16th, acknowledges, and I think sort of neatly summarizes the impact and importance of both the Gothic style of architecture and this idea of aesthetics as an integral part of our worship. And that collect reads, "Gracious God, we thank you for the vision of Ralph Adams Cram, John Lafarge, and Richard Upjohn, whose harmonious revival of the Gothic enriched our churches with a sacramental understanding of reality in the face of secular materialism. And we pray that we may honor your gift of beauty, of holiness through them for the glory of Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God in glory everlasting. Amen." And so, actually, occurred to me I could take off my mask here. So that line about enriched our churches with a sacramental understanding of reality just sort of reinforces that notion that beauty and sacramentality are, if not the same thing, at least sort of inextricably linked. So now onto some slide in his presentation as well. And it shows our chancel in 1906, just a couple of months before the church was officially completed. And before I forget, I want to give a shout out to Betsy Hammond from the Oregonian. Betsy and her staff spent at least a good part of a morning a couple of weeks ago digging through their archives for us to see if they could find an original of this photograph, or even a better scan of this, but they couldn't come up with anything. So this is so far the best we have of this. But what is of particular interest is this border, the stenciled border across the back wall of the chancel. And we know now that that border pattern ran all the way around the chancel and the nave, because we keep running into it when the sextons are doing wall repair. And the lower left photo here shows the sort of the overall area that was exposed, and the top picture is a sort of a close-up of that. And so it's about 12 inches between the two horizontal border lines, but you can see the curves and lobes in there with that Bob and I both think would almost certainly have been an acanthus leaf pattern. And then below that, after way too many hours of internet research, looking for, stencil border patterns in early 20th century American churches, came up with what I think it probably would have looked like. And I think it would have made a nice decorative element to the church. And I, for one, think we should consider putting it back. I mean, it would just be paint. And if we didn't like it, we could easily undo it, but it might go a long way to some sort of undoing some of the austerity that was foisted upon our worship space as part of the 1983 remodel. They cleaned up the space pretty well and made it plainer, I think, than it needed to be. So the other thing of interest in this is, I don't have a pointer to show it, but the object on the back wall to the right of the altar is what I think is an ombre, and what I think is actually this ombre here. For those of you here, it's sitting behind me, and for those of you on Zoom, you'll have to look at the picture here. And the inset is just a real zoomed in bit of the previous slide. I'm not 100% convinced that these are the same thing, but based on how long this has been down in the basement, I'm pretty sure they were related. So this would have been relegated to the basement 100 years ago when they put the new paneling in the chancel, and then that paneling was removed as part of the 1983 remodel, and it got moved into the vestibules on both sides of the narthex. So this is looking to be restored, and we need to find a suitable place for it somewhere in the building. So I want to talk about crosses, and this is, last time I did this was almost 2 years ago, and this is where I left off. And so this is mostly going to be about our crosses, some that we still have, some that we don't. But this is the sheet from the front sheet for the plans that David C. Lewis did in 1904 of our church. Our church, of course, completed in 1906. But it's showing these galvanized iron crosses on the building. This is a close-up from the plan, and showing this gal iron is an abbreviation for galvanized iron. And that's what was planned, and the photo to the right is what they came up with. And that's I think a good looking cross. That's probably 7 feet tall with the base, and so the arms are probably 6 feet across, and balances, I think, the space rather well. And here's the whole picture of it. This picture is probably pushing 1920 or so. It's already got the ivy on in some of the earlier photos is gone out, and it shows the cross on the north end of the transept as well. So jump ahead to 1954, and we have plans by architect Richard Sunderleaf for a new redwood cross that was to be 5 feet 6 inches tall, and these really nice bronze brackets to hold it in place on the building. And I think this is the time, if the galvanized iron crosses they probably gave up on the other two, and just were worried about a cross on the east end of the building here. And this is the only photograph I have of that cross, and it was a pretty plain, just a Latin cross. Of course, it had replaced a Celtic cross, and to me, it looks a little small, and the scale is just a little off. But this photograph is from the Oregonian, that was published along with an article about Dr. Kempton and his 25th anniversary as rector of the church. And actually a really good article, real nice long interview with Dr. Kempton, talking about some of the building projects and the changes that have taken place under his rectorship. And in fact, the article says that it was Kempton who suggested this composition for this photograph. Then jump ahead to 1968, and we have installation of this 700-pound, 12-foot tall aluminum cross. The cross was a memorial to Amy C. Fields, who was the wife of the former senior warden Arthur Fields. And this plaque is still in the narthex, commemorating the gift of that cross. And this is Dr. Kempton on the left, and Arthur Fields with him. And Kempton retired in 1968, so this is probably one of his last things that he did at the church. So then, so this photo also from an Oregonian article in January of 1970. And I put it in here mostly so you can see what the big cross looked like from the courtyard, but I'm going to read you the rather short article that accompanied this photograph. It says girls were added this year to the 5th grade class of Mark Howard, 5-year veteran Sunday school teacher at Trinity Episcopal Church. Among the students of the weekday Portland State University administrator are, from left, Molly S. Morton, Dorothy C. Hart, Bill Session, and Susan J. Hart. Howard finds the addition of girls brings better behavior, lengthens attention span. He spends 2 to 3 hours a week preparing Sunday lessons to make everyday happenings relevant to religion. He and his wife have 3 children. Oldest is 6. And that photo appeared in the Sunday Oregonian under the headline, "Religion Makes the Scene" in 1970, which is really groovy. This was a half-page photograph, and the article had other sort of shorter vignettes from other denominations talking about how they're relating to the young people and how to make religion relevant in the 70s. So, you know, they're kind of making news about the new decade and religion's place in it. But you can tell here, this is what we typically get from a scanned Oregonian article. This was actual the actual press photo that I was able to buy off of eBay. And eBay, most of these photos I've been able to purchase on eBay. It's a one would think an odd source of history, but we've been pretty lucky. And the other thing is, you know, I don't know these. I hope somebody knows these people. Molly Morton, Dorothy Hart, Bill Sessions, Susan J. Hart. So I was in 5th grade in 1970, and I just turned 64, I think. So, you know, they'd be my age, and I hope they are still around and well. So this is our current cross on the building, and it was completed in 1983 by famed Portland artist Manuel Izquierdo. And I mean famed Portland artist Manuel Izquierdo. And so if you talk to your friends in the Portland art community or the Northwest art community or the West Coast art community, and even, you know, across the country, and you tell them that you have a bronze cross made by Manuel Izquierdo decorating your building, you'll typically get a wow. Izquierdo was really a popular and really good artist, and we are very lucky to have some of his work here. It's made of bronze, and it's should last for centuries up there. And it's got a lovely patina on it. I don't know what Izquierdo's relationship with Trinity was, but we have vestry minutes indicating that he met with Father Wagner to talk about the cross project, and then some months later showed up at a vestry meeting with a model of the cross, and the vestry approved the design, but with the stipulation that the cross be no more than 6 feet tall. And so no doubt a pendulum swing away from the big 12-foot tall cross that it was replacing. Fortunately, the artist had a much better eye for proportion than the vestry did, and the cross is actually 8 feet 8 inches tall by 4 feet 7 inches wide. And I only know that because when we replaced the roof in 2016, I asked the roofing contractor if when they were up there, if they would measure it for me, and they did. The history book in 2014 describes this cross as about 8 feet tall, which, as it turned out, was a pretty good guess on my part. But I tried everything I could to measure it from the ground, but I was not about to attempt to get up on the roof. But if you are not familiar with Manuel Izquierdo and his work, you can take a Saturday or take a weekend road trip and just tour around first Portland, then up and down the Willamette Valley. His works are in many public buildings, public parks, even private buildings, museums, probably every college campus between here and Ashland. This guy was really the real deal. So has done just magnificent work. And again, we're very lucky to have his work represented here at Trinity. And besides that, it's a lovely cross and fits perfectly on the building. So Okay, enough about enough about that. This is the Hinckley Memorial Cross that sits just out here in the courtyard. And it was a gift from the artist, who is a Trinity parishioner, Mary Chomenko Hinckley. And it is a memorial to her brother Anton and her mother Tatiana. And we dedicated the cross, Bishop Hanley dedicated the cross on Trinity Sunday in 2015. And so it's another bronze Celtic cross. It's just sitting on a basalt stone there, base. And this is Mary in February of 2015 working on the cross. And this other picture is of the cross. This is a plaster model that she brought to a vestry meeting so that we could take a look at it. But it shows the back of the cross, and it's not as ornately decorated as the front. But again, just a lovely brass cross, that bronze cross rather, that should last for years and years. This is, first let me say, this photo is by Jeff Krause, and it's the one that we used in our history book. But this is the Laylaw Memorial Cross, and it was given to Trinity at Christmas 1889 by the Honorable James Laidlaw in memory of his wife, Louise Carpenter Laidlaw, who had died in 1886. And this cross was used for decades as our altar cross in the second church, and in this church as well. And it's straight out of the Gorham Company catalog. You could get these from sizes from 12 to 40 inches, and either plain or etched with passion flowers. And we have the 40-inch version with the passion flowers. The cross in the chapel is the plain version without the passion flowers, and slightly smaller. I would guess that it's probably 30 inches, the one in there. But this is from the 1914 Gorham catalog from their ecclesiastical department. And Gorham is, of course, famous for its china and its silver, but like many companies, they had an ecclesiastical department for years and years. And we have several things from them as well, some of our offering plates and brass vases and whatnot. So this cross, when it was our altar cross, was stolen from the altar on December 23rd, 1978, 2 days before Christmas. It's like, who does that? Well, apparently a disgruntled sexton did that. And the cross was returned 3 weeks later in exchange for a $250 reward. And so, happily the cross, came back to us. So that cross also survived the 1894 flood and the 1902 fire in our second church, but not the 1983 chancel remodel. And so it was replaced as the altar cross in 1983. And when it was found, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, found in quotes, it had been in storage in the sacristy's closet for some decades. And I think it was Helen Sudbury who told me that there was a big cross in there. And Dennis Sellon and I went in and got it and looked at it. And it's just like, wow, this is amazing. And we actually took and put it in the sacristy and put it up on the safe, so at least people would know about it. But nobody really knew about it. And then thanks to Dennis, it would occasionally make appearances in the nave, for six weeks at a time in the summer or something, just sort of special occasions, just so people could see it again. But actually, thanks to COVID, it's now out and in use again. So they set it up at the front of the nave, and this was the prayer station where you could come in when we were having the pilgrimages, when you could make the appointments to come in and spend some time in the cathedral. And they've paired it with the votive candles and the Glissa Minot litany desk that used to be at the back of the nave. And I, for one, think this is a really excellent spot. Actually, I lobbied our former dean several years ago to make a sort of a side altar right here with this cross as part of it. But that didn't happen till now. And while I've got it pictured here, I do want to talk about the Glisten Minot litany desk. And if you've heard any of my presentations ever before, you've heard me say that I think this is the finest piece of ecclesiastical furniture that we have in the building. It's really a magnificent piece. The design is superb. The scale is just perfect. And the craftsmanship is just really, really amazing. And again, wonderful photos from by Jeff Krause. And when we were taking these photos, well, Jeff took the photos. I was holding this nifty black background, but the cushion had been out for repair for apparently the first time in 113 years. But that was okay, because I think it actually, with the cushion gone, shows off the detail and the craftsmanship of this even more. And then I blew up the picture of the backside of the litany desk, because it's a side you don't often see. And again, the detailing on this, the design is really fabulous. I'm going to have to consult my notes to tell you more about that. So this was given on Easter Sunday, 1898, by Florence Glisten Minot and her husband Arthur Minot on the occasion of the baptism of their son Joseph. And there's a small brass plaque commemorating that on the desk. And Florence Glisten Minot was the daughter of Dr. Rodney Glisten, who Glisten Street here is named after. And the Glisten families had a really significant impact over the years here at Trinity. We owe them a lot. So this is our current altar cross, and it was given in memory of Catherine Hart Stevens by Ethel Stevens and her children William, James, Lenhart, and Susan. And they also gave us the 6 candlesticks. There's 3 on each side of the cross. It's a glory cross. It's got this sunburst pattern in the center. And the cross itself was made by Bureau and Sons out of San Francisco, and they are generations old silversmiths and still in business today. I did email them a picture of this cross and asked them if they could tell me anything about it, and they just said, well, it's one of our crosses, but somebody else welded it to this base, and the base that matches the candlesticks. So this is really a lot of fun. This is the Ellsworth Memorial Cross. It was a memorial to Alan M. Ellsworth. It was made in 1951 and originally hung in the chapel of Good Samaritan Hospital. And how it came to be at Trinity is really is kind of a fun story. So Alan Ellsworth was the office manager at Good Samaritan Hospital for 11 years prior to his death in 1947. And he had also served as secretary of the board of St. Helens Hall, which was, of course, the Episcopal Girls' School that is now Oregon Episcopal School. And he was a member of the chapter of at St. Stephen's when it was the cathedral there. So the story of how we got this cross, how it came to Trinity, actually starts with this painting that is now hung in the hallway outside of the library. And it's a seascape by the Reverend Bernard Geyser, painted in 1962. Geyser was a priest in the diocese and an artist. And the painting was donated by the family of Bob Simpson, who was a former chancellor of the diocese and a board member at Good Samaritan Hospital and a member of Christ Church Lake Oswego. The family had originally approached the Portland Art Museum and asked if they were interested in the painting, and the Art Museum declined, noting that they already had similar paintings by Geyser in their collection. And so then they approached Trinity, and we were really rather delighted to be able to accept it. So Geyser, who was already a professional artist before he became a priest in 1924, but he continued to paint really throughout his life. He showed up, came to the Diocese of Oregon in 1931, and of his ecclesiastical work, he is probably best known for painting the 11 large murals and altar triptych at St. Mark's Church here. St. Mark's, now Anglican Church, had been an Episcopal church then. This painting on the left is actually a Good Samaritan Hospital that he did in 1944, and that's typical of his earlier work. This seascape from 1962 is typical of his later work. So while doing research on Geyser and that painting, I found this photograph again on eBay of Reverend Geyser holding the Ellsworth Memorial Cross, and this long article about Ellsworth and about Geyser and about Ambrose Seliger, who was who actually did the carving of it. Geyser was the chaplain at Good Sam at the time, and I said this was intended to be a memorial to Ellsworth. In the article, Geyser notes that the design was inspired by the large Romanesque cross worn by Dr. Kempton. And try as I might, I've never been able to find a photo of Kempton with that cross. So the artist who did the actual carving was Ambrose Seliger, and he was a woodworker, and most notably worked with Amy Gorham, the famous marquetry artist, and helped with the marquetry panels that are at Timberline Lodge and some that are at St. John the Evangelist in Milwaukee. And Amy Gorham also did our children's chapel, the altar on our children's chapel. And given the time frame of when she was doing that and working with Seliger, it seems likely that Seliger helped her with that work too. And then the Lewis wing of Good Samaritan Hospital is named after Cicero Hunt Lewis, who was a Trinity parishioner, and his wife gave significant funds for its construction after his death. And you'll recall that the Eagle Lectern is a memorial to Cicero Lewis. So armed with basically this photograph of Reverend Geyser and the cross, and with the knowledge that the Lewis wing of Good Samaritan Hospital had been demolished in 1975, we kind of launched a quick and actually turned out to be a short and successful search for the cross. This photo is showing Bishop Biliardi chiseling out the cornerstone of the Lewis wing in 1975, just prior to it being demolished. And Bill and Nancy Bennett's, Bill was, I think he's now retired, a physician at Good Sam, and Nancy has served for years as chair of our Interiors Committee on the buildings and grounds. But so she sent Bill up to the current chapel at Good Sam and to look for the cross. And in not finding it there, he went and talked to Sally Bowman, the Reverend Sally Bowman, who is the current director of spiritual care at Good Sam, and said he was looking for this. And she's like, oh yeah, no, right where that is, and marched him down to this storage room where apparently it had languished since 1975 or so. When found, the Belgian crystals were missing, and the cross was cracked right just below the arms. They were actually had been screwed together there. And this is a photo showing the back of the cross. And then after just some discussion with Nathan, with Sally and all, she sent it home with Bill, and then Nancy Bennett took it down to the Cultured Pearl and had them do the restoration work. And as those crystals were missing and would have been rather difficult and expensive to replace, they just filled in the holes and then just painted it a good color. So it arrived at Trinity in March 2018. And don't know if I mentioned, but this hangs in the foyer below the stairs to up to the choir robing rooms. So you pretty much walk past it if you're enter the cathedral that way. So this is what I've called always the reeded cross. And I got that term from the several appraisals that we've had done over the years, because appraisals have described it as that, as if, 4 reeds, bound together in the form of a cross. And I always presumed that there was some sort of symbolism associated with the reeded cross. Turns out there's not. Once again, after many hours of internet research, never been able to find another cross like this. I know Dennis Sellen has looked as well. I certainly wouldn't think it'd be one of a kind, but kind of use this as our second processional cross. We have a larger processional cross that we mostly use, and if we have a bunch of acolytes, we'll use this second cross. And the only really thing I know about it is that we've had it since at least 1918. Here's another Oregonian article published on Easter Sunday, 1918, talking about what's going on in the various churches and whatnot. And once again, Trinity gets top billing with the photograph here showing our acolytes and choristers, and one of them holding this cross. And this one is kind of interesting. This is 2 acolytes carrying the cross and the American flag. And the occasion is the consecration of the Reverend Thomas Jenkins as Bishop of Nevada from January 25th, 1929. Jenkins was a priest in the diocese and was elected Bishop of Nevada. And so he was consecrated here. He was the first bishop consecrated at Trinity. And even our bishops in the Diocese of Oregon, prior to Dagwell in 36 or 37, were all consecrated elsewhere. But interestingly, they're coming out of the building that used to be the parish hall, that used to be right here. And recall that after the fire in 1902 at our second church, we moved up to this site and took over the drill hall of the Bishop Scott Academy, which had been several hundred feet that way. And then at some point they moved that building, which is the building that's shown here, to more or less this location of Kempton Hall. And so this is actually one of the few photographs we have of that. And the congregation worshiped in this building for 4.5 years while this building was under construction. So so this is the Thornton processional cross, or what they often call the large processional cross. It was given in 1896 by the Honorable Professor Richard H. Thornton, who was founding dean of the University of Oregon Law School, which was located in Portland at the time. And he was, for a long time, the chancellor of the diocese. I don't know much about this cross other than it's highly decorated. It's really quite lovely. And an interesting bit that we have is and so they can see it at home. This is a plastic replica of the cross that we just found in the Glisten suite one day. And it's the same on both sides. I don't think it would have been like a salesman's sample, because this cross from 1896, we wouldn't have been using plastic. So I don't know anything about this, where it came from, how it showed up at Trinity, but it's just a little plastic version of our large processional cross. And just to give you some scale, I've put this photo up here. This is from just Easter Sunday here, and showing as at least some of our favorite vergers and one of our favorite clergy. And then this is a cross that I would very much like to find. So we had a rood screen across the chancel from 1937 till about 1948 or 1949. And we still have pieces of that rood screen downstairs in the basement, some of the very long molding pieces and these two triangular pieces on either side of the arch. And the long part of those triangular pieces is probably 5.5 feet or so. So that would make this cross 5 or 6 feet tall, and no idea where it wound up once it was removed. And that's all I have. So I think I talked faster than what I had rehearsed it, but that leaves us plenty of time for questions. So anyone questions? Ron?
Not a question, but a comment. I heard a snarky comment about Trinity many years ago, vis-a-vis its Gothicness, that it should be either twice as tall or half as wide to be consistent with most any other Gothic building.
Yeah. So we are actually an early English Gothic style. We're not the middle pointed Gothic that the ecclesiologists and others preferred. But we were quite intentionally designed that way. We were kind of coming to the end of that love affair. But this is still, it is a big building. It's really wide. To sort of conform to the standard, it would have had to have a sort of the side aisles with lower roofs that you could tell were the side aisles from outside the building and everything else. But yeah, you're right. It's similar to early English Gothic, but on a scale that you would not have seen in the 12 and 1300s in England when that style was first popular. It's blown up to big proportions. So
the kneeling lectern where the cushion was being repaired.
Yeah.
Where was that lovely piece made? That was what, 1870s?
That was it. What did I say? 1898. I think it was made by Jane R. Lamb Studios. We have
Here in Portland?
no, they're out of New York, an ecclesiastical supply house. They're still around and still do stained glass, but we have from them the bishop's chair, our rector's chair that's in the chapel, and the eagle lectern. And that desk showed up at the same time as the eagle lectern, and purchased by the same sort of extended families. So my strong suspicion is, and just the craftsmanship is so good. My strong suspicion is that it was made by Jane R. Lamb, but I haven't yet been able to confirm that. So might take a trip to Washington, D.C. and the National Archives. They donated all their, of course, I've contacted Jane R. Lamb and said, no, we donated all our records to, I think, the Smithsonian or the Library of Congress, something, but thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Questions?
How about the eagle lectern? Do you know, is that newer?
So the eagle lectern showed up at the same time as that glisten Minot litany desk. And so it would have been 1898, I think. It's a lovely piece and a memorial to Cicero H. Lewis. So, well, I don't have time to get into it, too much, but yeah, it's really a lovely piece. That was one of the pieces I showed this last time with my dire warning of the plans they had for as part of the chancel remodel of taking the eagle off of the base and putting it on this plain brass base. And fortunately, cooler heads prevailed, and we didn't do that. But it's a lovely piece with really a lot of rich symbolism in it. So, others?
I have a question on Zoom, if you can hear me.
Yeah. Hi, Jan.
Hi, yes. So one couple is the installation of the cross in the courtyard. I have that stone base you said was basalt, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I have that big basalt. I have photos of when that basalt block was moved up and installed. It was quite a procedure. So if you ever want those, let me know.
Yes, I do.
Email me. But if you could go back to the one with the Sunday school chart in 1970, if we can go back to that slide for a moment. It is a ways back.
Getting there. There we go.
Has anyone checked like the records to see if there, like, Lisa, Molly and Susan and Dorothy, to see if there was weddings and like their married names, or
No,
try to track down?
I haven't dug that deep. I looked in Realm to see if
They were
it
still
was
here.
still listed, but couldn't find any of them. So
Yeah, it'd be interesting to find, where they are now, if any of them are still in the area.
yeah.
Maybe recreate the photo with them at least. Interesting.
All right, other questions?
Girls might be Hal Hart's daughters.
Who's that?
Hal Hart,
Harold Hart, Hal Hart.
he's an attorney.
Okay. Yeah, I don't, but if you ask around, I mean, ask around if that's them. It'd be nice to just sort of make that connection and know who they are and how they're doing. So. All right, anyone else?
Yeah, you can maybe have Arwen share the photo on social media, or the parish social media, to say, anyone know who, them or where they are. That would be might be one way. And I think you had, when you started to go backwards, there was a photo of the children's chapel we had not seen yet.
Yeah, I didn't want to get too, well, here, I can. Show it briefly. I wasn't gonna, there's just so much detail and whatnot in it that, well, and it's not very well lit. I had sort of put this photo in as a placeholder, but the altar has all this interesting marquetry in it and symbolism that, again, done by Amy Gorham, who's a fairly famous Portland area artist. So.
And for those who don't know, that's the children's chapel.
That's where.
Sweetheart.
Oh, yeah.
So it's the children's
Sorry, yes,
chapel.
this is the children's chapel, which is just upstairs, above the, well, let's see, upstairs above the kitchen, I think. Anyway. Okay, I think I'm done. And
Thank you very much.
thank you.